Yeah, on.
Two twins.
And you see, I always, I just sort of think, you know, what you want to do is just try and make music that you can't hear anywhere else. You want to just try and be as unique as you can and as diverse as you can, and just see if there are ways of kind of like mixing different areas of music and getting them across with each other in a way which isn't, you know, obvious.
Mark Hollis, probably at his, this was in his later years, where he was a little, what do we say, nicer, you know, calmer, just sort of not annoyed all the time doing interviews and stuff, right?
Well, he wasn't nice. He's complicated. He's a complicated artist. But I do wonder, you know, you ever think about that if you take an accent off of somebody or add an accent onto somebody, how much that would change your perception of them? He's a good example. Like if you take away his British accent, which I think is a Northern accent, I wonder if you're just like, that guy's a jerk, you know, but his accent makes him sound a little more interesting. Or it's always vice versa too. You know, you tack on an accent to somebody. So, you know, different bird. Mark Hollis, different bird, and just passed away 4 years ago. One of those deaths that definitely was noticed by many, not mainstream, but, you know, I would compare it a little bit to Peter Steele of Typo Negative. I mean, the day he passed away, there were people like us, Nub, that were distraught. And I think, albeit, you know, Mark was, you know, in his mid 60s, but certainly a key loss for many people who, I would say musicians, music appreciators, and those that always took kind of a critical eye toward music. And so, you know, it's an episode that, and welcome to Two Twins in an Album, by the way, episode 83, 84. We did our last episode. We had a special guest. So this is our first, like the 84, actually. This is our first like normal episode in a while. You know, you're just kind of stuck with the two of us just doing our thing. But I think we've been, you know, Nubs, I don't want to speak for you. I think we've been meaning to, and I know we've mentioned the band, but we've been meaning to kind of focus on this group, this album, and certainly this artist for some time. That could be described in so many ways, but probably most commonly as a little bit unheralded, but over the years has probably become more acclaimed. I'm sure many of our listeners have heard some of the songs. I'm sure many of our listeners are aware, but maybe not high on the radar for a lot of people. So it should be an interesting thing to kind of dig into here, Nub, regardless of kind of the level that you're sort of at with this group. And I think those levels are probably varying across the board with many music fans. You want to hear an intended pun?
Yeah, sure.
To everything you said, no doubt.
Oh, there you go.
No doubt.
Yeah, we'll get to that too. Yeah. Well, let's do another pun and get this thing off right like we usually do and take it round and round. Come on, baby. All right, now it's been a bit. So what, I don't know if you got anything new, you got anything old, you got anything somewhere in the middle. What's been round and round spinning for you, bro, Seth?
So this band that I've been talking about now for a few months and the band is Big Wreck.
Is your voice still hoarse?
Yeah, I mean, it's just perpetually.
Yeah.
Perpetually.
What's going on? It sort of never goes away.
Yeah. A lot of talking.
Are you ripping cigs these days? Is there something I don't know about? You smoking menthols or something? Like what's going on?
Virginia Slims. Yeah.
Yeah. Virginia Slims. Right.
Yeah, exactly. No, the truth is I like desperately need a glass of water, which I'm going to go grab.
Why don't you go get one?
Perhaps. Okay. I'm going to go do that.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
Why don't you time me? How fast can I go?
Okay. Go ahead. I'll tell a joke. This is an old Super Dave Osborne joke. Guy walks into his house. He's got a duck in his arm. Walks up to his wife and says, "Here's the pig I've been screwing." Wife says, "That's not a pig. That's a duck." Husband says, "I wasn't talking to you."
Thank you, T. Jeez, really needed that.
I told a joke when you were gone.
Oh, did you? Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Do you want to hear it?
Sure.
I'll tell it again. It's an old Super Dave Osborne joke. Guy comes home and he's got a duck in his arm. Walks up to his wife and says, "Here's the pig I've been screwing." His wife says to him, "That's not a pig. That's a duck." Guy says, "I wasn't talking to you."
Hey-oh. That's good.
Anyway.
Love Super.
All right.
Okay.
Go ahead with your running around.
Yes. The band is Big Wreck, which is a band that just is so amazing. And American audiences just don't really know them. They're from Canada, like many good things. And I've just been listening to so much of them. They're putting out these EPs. They just announced a tour of the US. They don't tour the US a lot.
Nice.
They're playing Detroit the day that I leave for a European vacation, a National Lampoon's European vacation.
That's bad.
But the night before, they are playing in Cleveland. And I will be going, of course, because I just haven't been able to see them at all. And we'll get the chance. So anyway, Big Rex, but for the Sun, the new album from the Prague Collective, which is Billy Sherwood from Yes. This is the thing he does where he invites like 500 prog musicians to be guests. Mm-hmm. And everyone like has different songs, and it's very cool. Their new album, Seeking Peace, been enjoying that quite a bit lately. And then kind of a nighttime record that I've been getting into. T, does the name Gary Brooker mean anything to you?
Gary Booker. No, I don't think so.
Gary Brooker is he's the lead singer of Procol Harum. Yeah, Gary Brooker.
Oh.
He was the lead singer of Procol Harum. He just died in February. He put out a solo record with Phil Collins on the drums called Lead Me to the Water. It's really, really good. It's a good nighttime chill album that I've been listening to and very much enjoying. So that is what's running around.
What do you listen to when you like, what's your sleep? Do you have some sleep albums? Like any jump out?
Yeah. The main sleep album.
You should do a round and round Sleepy Times version.
It'd be a good Sleepy Time thing.
Sleepy Times edition. Yeah.
There's a lot of soundtracks that I like to listen to during Sleepy Time, but the two that are quite regular would be Keith Jarrett, the Colne concert. Keith Jarrett solo piano, all improv. The Colne concert is like his probably most famous album. And then I have a Brian Eno playlist that I like with some of his pop stuff, but mostly his ambient.
I was just looking through my sleepy mix. Dido. I listen to Dido. Enya, of course.
You've always had like a thing for Dido. You know, you're like carrying that flag.
Well, she put out a live album, live at the Brixton Academy, and it's great. I like that better than her like sort of studio produced stuff.
Yeah, because all the songs were a little more raw. I remember that.
Yeah, they're raw. They're good. Jim Bajer Awakening, certainly. You know, I think we've talked about that before.
We did, yeah. Our childhood sleep album.
Yeah. Neil Young Unplugged. So anyway.
All very sleepy choices, team.
Yeah.
All right, what's spinning around for you, buddy?
You know, I'm on a little bit of an old country kick. Okay. And, you know, sometimes when the springtime's rolling around me, it's like 65 degrees today up here in Mish. You know, for us, it's, you know, even in April, big deal, you know. So I like to get the old country out. You know, I think that's a good transition into summer. And so 3 things. The first is the great Kinky Friedman, who is mentioned on, you remember the Norm Macdonald podcast show that he had with Adam Egget and all that?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Well, he had one of my favorite episodes when he had Billy Bob Thornton on. and they talk a lot about country music and such, and they talk about Kinky Friedman, so because of course Billy Bob Thornton's like buddies with him. So, but self-titled, first album from the 70s is great stuff. The second is The Highwaymen. The Highwaymen, Nub?
Yeah, I can't name each one, but yes.
Could you name any of them?
One of that would be like
a super group.
Johnny Cash was one of the Highwaymen.
Johnny Cash was in it. Yes, sir.
Waylon Jennings.
Oh, now you're cheating.
Swear to God. Are you out of your mind?
All right. Who else?
Who else would have been that era? I'm honestly that
That's
era.
Good.
Probably Willie Nelson. Good. Was he in it?
Willie Nelson was in it. Yeah. And there was a fourth.
Oh, there were four?
Yeah.
Shit. God, if I get all four of these.
I'll give you a hint. He was in one of the worst movies ever made.
Chris Christopherson.
There you go.
He was in Michael Cimino's Heaven's Gate.
Michael Cimino's Heaven's Gate. Yeah. Ruined his career and took down the entire United Artists company, So other than that, it was great. The third is also a debut album by a band called The First Edition. And Nubs, you know who the front man of The First Edition was? I would say
Kenny Rogers. Kenny Rogers in The First Edition. That's right. So anyway, going a little country on you there, buddy, which doesn't necessarily fit with today's episode very, very tightly. However, for all we know, that then the direction that tonight's featured band was headed, maybe an outlaw country album was next. They certainly, or should we say he didn't say no very often. Actually, we'll talk about Mark Hollis's solo album too, because maybe that would be considered experimental country to some.
Yeah, this was the type of episode where starting out it was like, oh man, this could be like a 35-minute, this could be pretty open and shut. And then the more you get through it, it's like there's actually a lot to talk about with this guy and certainly this band. But why don't we start, and then we'll see where it goes from there with them nerdy deets.
You want some dirty deeds? Yeah. You want some dirty deeds?
All right, It's My Life was the sophomore album, the second from the band Talk. It was released on February 21st, 1984. They had a first album. Was it self-titled?
It was called The Party's Over.
Party's Over was their first album, and then this was their second, and they would go on to release three more. Color of Spring, Spirit of Eden, and Laughing Stock. I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about those. They got obviously less and less commercially successful as their career went on, but certainly more acclaimed by many and certainly in a more experimental direction. But I would say that, Color of Spring certainly kept a little bit of the pop commercial sensibility going, but was already starting to move away from it a little bit. This is probably the peak in terms of their commercial success and their sort of pop acumen, I would say, at this point in the band's career. This was released on EMI. The producer is an interesting piece of the puzzle here. Tim Fries-Green, who basically was a member of the band. Little bit of, and you've seen it over time, particularly with producers, kind of the hidden member of the band. I think that was kind of part of the deal with Tim, helped Mark Hollis with a lot of composition, and that would continue, and I think he was a big supporter of some of Mark's artistic and musical direction. He really, after this record, he really became a very big part of the group and sort of Hollis's main collaborator. And the guy we keep talking about is the frontman, songwriter, composer. I mean, the band here is really important, and we will talk about it. But Mark Hollis was the brains, the arms, and the legs of Talk. Never really satisfied artistically, and I think that he and Tim, the producer here, were kind of two peas in a pod. They were notorious perfectionists, to the point where even in some instances they actually brought in Mike Oldfield to play a fretted bass part on one of the songs on this record because, they weren't pleased with the regular bassist, Paul Webb, who's incredible and but more of a fretless player. So, they really were inclined to sort of get exactly what they wanted in the way that they wanted it. And they weren't afraid to talk about it either. The album cover, again, very artistic here. It incorporates elements from a painting from 1870 called The Boyhood of Raleigh. As we've talked about, I'm kind of a sucker for colorful album cover, so I really like this album cover quite a bit. This charted top 5 in the Netherlands and Germany and Switzerland. So this was a very commercially successful record throughout much of Europe. This was not particularly successful, nor was the band in general from a chart standpoint in their home country, which is kind of interesting. So you get that sort of effect that you've seen with some other groups where they do a lot better outside of their home country of the UK than they were able to within. This reached number 42 in the US, so it wasn't anything that dominated commercially, but certainly anytime you're cracking top 50 on the Billboard charts in 1984, you're definitely doing something right. But certainly got some radio airplay and got some attention, particularly the lead singles there, Nub.
The singles certainly reveal kind of Talk's whole thing, because none of the 3 are conventional in any way. It's My Life, the title track, probably the most conventional, the most coverable, as we would learn. But, Dum Dum Girl and Such a Shame, as brilliant as they both are, just nothing about those speaks radio, MTV, nothing. I do think that the difference between It's My Life and The Party's Over is I think The Party's Over, you're feeling like the band is maybe searching a little bit for a little commercial success. What's it called when a track is named after the band? Title track? The band title track? Band name track?
Self-titled? I don't know. Yeah.
Is this much more thumping, sort of dance floor,
kind of a club song. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's got a really catchy chorus. This one, you can feel Hollis and company slipping away from any care of that. Maybe they got the payday from The Party's Over and started caring less and less, but it's a transitional album between a commercial and experimental. You said that very well. But ironically, the transitional album also ended up being its most successful. So it is a fascinating band, which made fascinating music. Yep.
It really is. And I think the best way, clearly, the albums are so unique and so dynamic and really do start off, to your point about The Party's Over, a little bit more primitive and a little bit more stripped down and a little bit more upbeat and club oriented, and then more and more experimental as it goes on. The one thing though that maintained throughout their entire career, and you got to take yourself back to 1984 for context here, is the emphasis on playing live. And this was a band that sort of pioneered the idea from a pop standpoint, not necessarily from a prog. And there was a lot of complex layered music happening at this time, but I think they were the first to take a lot of sort of multifaceted elements and layering that are very dynamic in the studio. And then it was very important to them to figure out how to pull it off live. No matter how many people it took, no matter how many guys they needed on stage, they wanted this to be something that could be played and that could be executed in a live setting without too much. They used some DAT tape and they used some backing track, but not too much of it, right? So there was a lot of artistic integrity here, and the band has talked about it. There's interviews all over YouTube and whatnot, where even at this time, you hear them kind of scoff at a lot of groups, and they notoriously always hated lip syncing and kind of made a mockery out of it. And it's kind of funny. Even in their videos, there's a lot of protesting against lip syncing and these sorts of things taking place. So they always had a little bit of a sort of flippant attitude about some of the commercialism taking place at that time. But one of the things you really have to appreciate about the group is they always emphasize, we're not going to put anything on an album that we can't go out there and pull off live. And the pinnacle of this, I think, is their performance at Montreux in 1986. And there's they released it as a VHS. There's a DVD, and certainly in in the current, day and age, you can go on YouTube and watch the whole show. And actually the quality is pretty good, because it was recorded for home audio and it was recorded, for the purpose of being resold and repackaged. It's an unbelievably good performance. I mean, and they weren't afraid to go out there and play their hits. Now, this was not, a group that was angry about going out there and putting the material out that people wanted. But the way they created space and created jams and extended their songs and showcased the musicianship of the players, and there's a couple key ones that we'll touch on. If you want to get to know this band, we talked about it a little bit with the Supertramp thing where it was like, okay, they weren't just a studio output. Go watch their Paris performance and you can see the musicianship. If you go watch this 1986 Montreux performance, you see what Mark Hollis and what this band was really all about. Have you gotten a chance to, I'm sure you have, check that out top to bottom, Nub?
Oh, of course. Yeah, no, it's in the collection, if you will. They truly were focused on music and art and creativity. They were not showy. They were totally authentic.
Yeah.
And that comes across. And by the time that Montreux performance happened too, they had already basically thrown up their collective middle fingers to the mainstream. That's what's cool about that performance is they don't give a shit in that performance
no.
at all. And you could see that, but they're not flippant about it. They're not pretentious about it. They're not even rebellious about it. They're just doing what they do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even Hollis's stage presence and the other members of the band, I mean, they weren't trying to do anything to gain exposure. They were, I think, trying to do everything they could to just be musicians and be respected musicians. And
yeah,
that performance definitely shows that. They always struck me as a band that didn't love playing live. Maybe I'm wrong about that perception, but it didn't seem like they loved touring a lot and playing live. I've never spoken with somebody who said, I saw Talk in the 80s. I'm sure it's a big badge of honor to have said that you've seen this band,
Oh yeah. I mean, they kind of toured when they had to. And that was part of, I think you could tell that playing at Montreux was cool for them. They weren't phoning it in. It wasn't like another show on another tour. I mean, at one point, Hollis does an interview and they were touring with Elvis Costello, and you could just tell he's like, just didn't want to be, it's like, we have to do this because we have to expose ourselves to the States, but like, this is not what we choose to be doing, and, listen, was he flippant at times? Yes. I mean, and certainly would he be the most fun guy to interview if you're out there trying to do your job and get content and get participation from your interviewee? I mean, no, probably not. But was he always honest and frank and forthright? And I don't think he was ever rude. I think he was just kind of a straight shooter and
he's an introvert. I think it's shyness. I don't think it's like even flippant. I mean, as the introvert of this little duo here, I could tell you that like, talking to people sometimes when you're that introverted and he's extremely introverted, it's like exhausting. It's not that you're being mean. It's not that you're not even happy to be doing it. It's just that it's taxing. It's exhausting. And I always saw a guy who wasn't mean or rude. I saw a guy who was very, very, very introverted being forced to play an extrovert on TV. And that's not always easy,
He has this really funny, they're doing an interview. They may have been the weekend of Montreux, or is at another festival. And they caught, Mark and his bass player, Paul, for a few minutes and did an interview. And they asked him about, recording in the studio for the next album. And this was in like 1986 or something. And he said that they were recording a box set that was going to be, multiple albums with a release date of 2008. It was just hilarious. It was just,
Yeah, we're just working on our new album.
Well, you're having a new album coming in soon. Vous avez un disque qui va bientôt sortir?
Sure, what we're working on is a 36 album box set, which is due for release in July of the year 2008, I believe.
Is that right?
Yeah. Is it June or July? What? July.
Listening to you making...
You just didn't get humor and sort of like just
super self-aware.
Yeah, in a way, flippancy like that back in those days when everyone was desperate for, I mean, people back then were desperate for interviews and exposure, right? And then they asked about any other projects, and Mark like kind of looked over at Paul and sort of said something about how he's going to be starring in an upcoming film playing Louis the 14th, or I mean, it was just bullshit, just funny.
This project you have about this album, what other projects do you have now? Quels autres projets vous avez à part cet album?
Paul's about to star in a film, isn't he, Paul?
Yeah, I ain't got the part yet, man, so I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah, but it looks very likely that Paul's going to star in this film as Louis the 14th.
But it's a good part.
Yeah, it is a very good part.
Yeah.
And it was a time where it was super, super rare. This was 84. This was super rare to have somebody who didn't want the spotlight. The supply and demand on spotlight at this time was very, imbalanced. And it was super rare to see a guy like Mark and a band like Tog Talk who really didn't have any interest in seeking it or chasing it. The other guys in the band that I would note that were sort of more the regulars are Lee Harris on the drums and Paul Webb on the bass. The bass is tremendously important to the Talk Talk sound. Typically a fretless. These guys were big on jazz and you get some of those kind of elements, but even on a few of the tracks we'll go through, the bass really drives it. The live execution of these guys is really fascinating. Like we talked about with the Montreux performance, you've got analog synths, you've got a baby grand piano on stage, you've got, drum triggers. There are a few moments where, Lee puts on the headphones and plays to a tape just so they can get some of the electronica across. But again, this is coming up on 40 years ago, and the technology back then was, took a lot to pull off. And they were able to do it not just through, technology and synthesizer usage and all that, but through really, really quality musicians, which they certainly had. All right. The No Doubt cover, which came out, what year was it? 2006 or something? Or
yeah, I mean, that sounds about right. Maybe earlier. I don't know, 2003 even.
They put out sort of a best of type of a deal, and they attached this as sort of a previously unreleased tune, and they covered the title track from this of It's My Life. It became a very big hit. What's your take on the No Doubt version, Dub?
My take is that I love the way it exposed a lot of listeners to Talk Talk. Like most covers that become incredibly successful, which it was, it allowed people to say, who's this? And then maybe hear the original and go back and maybe say, they were weird, and get into them a little bit. Right. So I love that. In terms of the cover itself, I think it's well done. I do. I think that it retains sort of a dance floor vibe to the song. I think that Gwen Stefani sings it really, really well. She captures some of Hollis's just sort of unique enunciations, vocal tones. It's a little bit overproduced for my taste, little slick, little polished, but overall I think it's very well done. I'm not surprised that it was as big of a hit as it was. But what I really love about it, and I do like the song, but what I really love about it is the way it introduced many people to Talk Talk that would have never otherwise even heard of the band. So what'd you think of it, man? Was that a dance floor hit for you, buddy?
I loved it. Yeah, I thought, and as somebody who was kind of certainly a fan of the original, we'll get to it a little bit in the Wonder Stories. I mean, I thought that they treated it really well. It is very produced. It's actually up a bit in key as well. I think just making it a little bit more accessible and upbeat and danceable, but it got to number 10 on Billboard. It was on the chart for 28 weeks, the No Doubt version. So, I mean, it was very successful. And yeah, I mean, if something like that isn't a butchery, which I think in no way was it, and it exposes people to maybe dig in more and find out a little bit more about the group and about Talk Talk and about Hollis and about all that stuff, then, all the better. So yeah, I was not only kind of fine with it, I actually, quite liked it. I still listen to it. And I think it's, nothing ever beats the original, but yeah, I'm bullish on the No Doubt cover. I think it was all pretty much well done. Well, why don't we get to some quick wonder stories, Nub, and then we'll take a waltz through It's My Life. So let's hit the wonder story. I think the interesting thing with these guys is not so much why or how, but when did you catch on to these guys, Nub? Because everybody kind of has their own. I don't think everyone caught on to these guys immediately in 1984. It's kind of been an acquired thing over time. What was your acquisition of these boys?
I mean, It's My Life was a big enough hit when we were kids where we knew it. And our mom, who we reference all the time on the podcast, had the 45 of It's My Life, or maybe even the album. She used to play it a lot. I remember she would play Talk Talk a lot, the song. She might have had that one too. Maybe she had The Party's Over. But it was played on our house a little bit because our mom was into pretty cool 80s pop music during those years for her. I don't know what the hell happened to her music taste since then, but it was pretty strong in the 80s. But really the discovery of this band was much, much later. Well into my late 20s, 30s. Couple catalysts. One was that you had gotten the Talk Talk Best of, I forgot what the actual name of it is.
Natural History, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. There's a live version of Life Is What You Make It on there. Yeah. That was big. Because the live version
single off on new album, Life Is What You Make It.
Life Is What You Make It. And then just boom.
Yeah.
That was big. Hearing them play that song so heavy and raw brought out something in the song that really caught my interest. So I have you to credit for that because you played that live version a lot. I still wasn't like thrilled with everything else, but I really loved that. And then they reissued all 4 of the original albums, aside from Laughingstock, on CD. EMI did these in Europe. They were great reissues. They were remastered. They sounded wonderful. The side of the spine side on the jewel case had TALK on both sides of it. You bought all 4. So, this was cool in the early 2000s, but you stack them up TALK, all 4 albums.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
And got those and then just really fell in love with all of them. Followed that journey from The Party's Over, which is this thumper, this 80s thumper. The band got more and more quiet as those albums went on. By the time you get to Laughingstock, which wasn't included in those 4, but I certainly picked up, the band is so quiet. And then Hollis's solo record, I mean, it's a total Headphones album. It defines Headphones album. And so the band got much more introspective musically, much
Is
quieter.
it good, his solo? I've actually never heard it.
It's incredible.
Really?
It's kind of beloved. It's really seen as this hidden gem of music. I think it was released, a few years after Laughingstock. It was not commercially huge.
Is that a Sleepy Times type of listen?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, the last 4 albums are,
Yeah. Yeah.
Really, so
there are parts of It's My Life that are Sleepy Times.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, the band just got quieter and quieter, more intricate. And I just really fell in love. I'd say the song though, that I still am just head over heels in love with, and we'll get to it, is Such a Shame. That's probably the one that got me, and still does.
Yeah.
And Life Is What You Make It. And a lot of this stuff off the ensuing 2 albums. So it was a slow learn. But I love this band. I absolutely love this band. And when Hollis passed away, it was really sad because, to your point, it was one of those kind of hidden treasures in music that maybe not so many people knew, but we sure felt it on the day that he was gone, even though we never got to see him or anything like that. So it's my talk story, T. So you talk. Go ahead and talk.
I have a pretty good one. So It's My Life was a song that I knew. I could sing it in my head, but I could never remember who did it, what the song was. I didn't know. I just knew how it sounded. I knew the lick. I knew the hook, but I couldn't. And this is before, I'm talking like, this is like right before college. There was no Napster or any of that stuff yet. So then I get to college and we discover LimeWire and Napster. And I'm like, not going to class because I'm downloading songs all night, and all this sort of thing. We were trying to get all these great 80s songs. And I would tell my buddies, there's this one song. I know it. Don't know who does it. It goes like this. And so this is in Kansas City. I started calling radio stations and humming it to them, because this was before you could search these things. So I actually called like 4 or 5 radio stations, and it's like, okay, the song I'm looking for is dun, 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 over my what? And I would go through the whole thing, and like everyone would just laugh and be like, whatever. And this was back when you could still like call radio stations, talk to a like human being, whatever. And then I'll be damned, I called one because they had played it. They had played it within the last hour. I was like, okay, what was that song you played like 3 songs ago? And they're like, whatever, no. And then they're like, Talk, It's My Life. And I was like, yes, that's it. So I think the first thing I probably did is I went to my computer and downloaded it for free, But then eventually I went over to the CD store and I bought Natural History, the very best of Talk, and just played the shit out of it. And from there, it really became, not quickly, but sort of over time, digging deeper into these guys. And it was like, wow, these guys are really amazing. Didn't really get into the later catalog until probably more recently in terms of like, Spirit of Eden, Laughing Stock. I mean, Spirit of Eden's kind of become like this like classic in terms of critical acclaim over time, right? But I started with Best Of. And then when you dig into the world of Mark Hollis, you go even deeper down a very fun, interesting, fascinating rabbit hole in terms of his personality, in terms of his persona, in terms of how he handled interviews, how they handled lip syncing performances, all these things. I mean, we could sit here and talk about it, but you just really have to watch it for yourself. So I would say it's one of those things, if you're looking to really learn more about a band and an artist, just go look it up. Just go watch clips of the Montreux performance, watch clips of him giving his sometimes half-assed interviews and tie it all together. And it really is a group that I think was pretty important. And I'm kind of glad we're dedicating episode 84 to these guys now. But why don't we turn our attention now to the reason we're here, Nub, the reason we've gathered here today. And that is to parse through their 1984 effort, It's My Life. Let's do it. So this record kind of comes out of the gate with a single, but I wouldn't necessarily call it a conventional single. I mean, it was the 3rd one released. I don't know that this was at the top of the list necessarily for the, record company or for management to sort of have out there. It's a little bit of a polarizing tune with a lot of Talk fans, as it turns out, but it's certainly one of their more well-known tracks, and it kicks off It's My Life with track 1, Dum Dum Girl. Interested in what side of the argument you're on here with this opening track, Nub. This is one that there are actually 2 on the record that Tim Fries-Green co-composed with Mark Hollis, and this is one of them. Where do you land on track 1, Dum Dum Girl, Nub?
I love it. I wish it would get to the point a little quicker. I will say that. So it's an interesting opening track choice, but it's very talk. I mean, you sort of go with that because it's a band of artists. But what I really like is you start to hear the complication of these textures.
Yeah.
And how they're all really intentional and how they play off of each other in really unique ways. Few bands got more out of just these little electronic percussion loops or these little noises or little accents or things like that. Synthesizer wise, they were much more Brian Eno than they were, Keith Emerson.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean that in a good way because they're really crafty, but everything complemented the other thing, right? Nothing was unnecessary. Nothing was unintentional, which made the mix of these albums really incredible. You could point out all these different elements. They're all really careful and thoughtful. This is a good example of that. I like when it all lifts, really like the chorus.
Mm-hmm.
the verses were a little, but they're part of setting the mood, right? So it all plays together in a really strategic way, and it's an opener that only Talk could do.
Yeah, I think you make a great point on the complexity. I mean, this is part of what's interesting about many of the tracks we're going to go through here, and this is no exception, is that there's some very complicated progressions going on here. This is not like straightforward major chord, same key, the entire song stuff. I mean, there's a lot of sort of inversions taking place. There's a lot of flipping of keys. There's a lot of dissonance and things that are pretty complex musically. You know, I mean, I've learned a few of these songs just on the guitar, just progression wise. And it's like, wow, like there's some crazy stuff going on here that, you know, sometimes it gets masked by some of the key and synth elements. But when you strip it down, it is pretty complex musically. I think it kicks it off well. I mean, I wish they wouldn't have introed with the dum 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 thing. I think they could have just kept that to a sort of interlude or sort of a tail, post-chorus tail, rather than having that intro the song. I think there could have been a cooler, maybe more gradual way to open the record. But hey, you know, as we're going to find in a lot of moments, as you said, they kind of did it the way they wanted to do it, and certainly didn't feel like there was a template or a norm to follow here. And I think part of that is the way this thing kicks off, but it did kick off with a single. So, you know, which was fairly common at the time. Then we get to track 2, and boy, you already touched on this one. Let's just go. Let's just get to it. Such a shame.
I don't know if I should change a feeling that we share. It's a shame.
You know, it's you kind of do these episodes, and you do this podcast that we've done and 84 episodes deep, and you sort of like try to be as analytical as you can and sort of not be a homer about things and not get too emotional about some of these songs or some of these albums or some of these artists, because then it just gets to be kind of annoying. But this is a song that and I don't know how many of these I can name that gives me chills every time I hear it. I mean, and I could probably listen to it 5 times a day and it still does. Pretty unique, pretty amazing. I think it's an absolutely incredible song. Just an incredible song. So I'll stop there. Your turn to gush.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that a lot of people would use the word genius with this band in some ways, because they truly were in a lot of ways. It's such an overused word in music, but this song is like sort of a work of genius in the sense that it's angular, but it's also like 4 on the floor. The key is Webb's bass line.
Yeah.
It just drives it, you know? He's such a good bass player. He's such an important part of the band. I know Hollis gets a ton of credit, but you know, Paul Webb is
huge part.
Huge. Yeah.
Huge part.
The chorus, I think, when you kind of get those searing synths that float in and out, it's a strange hook, but it's a hook. That's what's amazing about Such a Shame. It's still a pop song.
Oh, yeah.
It's a super unconventional pop song, but it's absolutely no doubt a pop song. And that chorus is just so,
yeah.
You know, it's so brilliant. And Hollis's voice, you're probably about to talk about the Montreux performance, but he is belting in that performance. I mean, so much heart that he's singing with. He's really singing it from the gut. I think this is a good example where the live performance made the studio version sound even better.
Yeah, he had no range. I mean, he had a very unique voice. I don't know that can you name anyone else that has a similar singing style? I'm not sure I can. I mean, it's extremely unique, but no range. Right here, he's pretty much giving you the high end. and you can see it at Montreux. This is, he's giving you everything he's got as far as top end, but sings it amazingly. And yeah, the version live, they do a break in the middle with a lot of percussive elements and stuff. I mean, it's really pretty incredible. But yeah, man, I think this is like a special song. There's other great ones on this record, but I think this one really stands out as a incredibly intelligent pop song from the 80s. I mean, Hollis was a very intelligent guy. This song was actually inspired by, he was very into books and literature and those type of things. It was inspired by a book called The Dice Man from 1971. And it's about a psychiatrist that makes decisions by rolling dice. And it's kind of a very heady thing. And the cover of the single actually is a dice with a scorpion sitting on it. So, he definitely was very outward by saying that this song was inspired by a favorite sort of piece of literature. Now, the other thing you got to touch on here with Such a Shame, one of the 3 singles, is the video. And as you can imagine, Hollis just hated doing videos. And, when we get to It's My Life, it's a whole nother story in terms of often, in that case and with this one as well, they had to make multiple versions because they just weren't sort of doing what they, the producer, director, whoever wanted them to do. And so one of the goofs they would do is they always thought lip syncing was just absurd. And remember, these guys are from the UK. This is like Top of the Pops, like at its height, right? Where you'd go on and you'd lip sync your song and you were guaranteed for it to go gold the next day, right? But they just hated it, And so one of the bits they would always do is to be super exaggerated with the lip syncing, And they did that in this video, to the point where it was kind of so absurd that they actually shot a second version. So, these guys in a lot of ways weren't afraid to kind of put up the middle finger. It wasn't ever done in a rude way, but it was certainly done in a you want us to hop around and pretend to sing and pretend to play our instruments. That's not really our thing. And Such a Shame that the video was kind of the first example of that. But yeah, a great way to the studio version is really tough to beat, but the way they treat that one live is pretty amazing and certainly worth checking out if you've yet to see it. Now, track 3, coming off of that, obviously kind of bring things down a little bit, but this is an interesting song in that Talk always closed their shows with this song. And again, this was not a group that was going to play their biggest hit last, and sort of get the crowd revved up. I mean, that wasn't their thing. And every set list I ever saw from these guys, Nub, unless you saw something ever differently, they would kind of clear out some of their high energy type singles. And then they would close their show with track 3, which is Renee. Not exactly going for that, want to have you, walking out of the show, pumping your fist, reciting the chorus, is it, Nub? But, again, that's what these guys were about. They weren't about sort of going for the sort of moment. They were about, making sure that even in a live concert setting that they were doing so in a way that was authentic to them. And closing with Renee seemed to be their kind of go-to move. What do you think of this track, albeit 6.5 minutes and a little on the slower side? What do you think, Nub?
I don't mind long, as we've well established. I don't mind slow. I just mind Renee. It's probably my least favorite song on the record. It's one of my least favorite of those core Talk albums. It's just a little too dreary, especially in the chorus. And I think this is the moment where Hollis's limited vocal range maybe gets to me a little bit. It's a flip track for me a lot of times. It's not because I'm so excited about getting the next one either. It's just because it's very slow moving. I think that
aren't you a little excited about getting to the next one though?
I think when you get to The Color of Spring and certainly Spirit of Eden, you're being so quiet and so ambient that it's a whole different art form. Renee is pushing towards that, but I don't know. I just find it to be a little dreary, a little boring. Just not one of my favorites, man.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's 6.5 pretty long minutes to me. And granted, I mean, listen, you got Such a Shame, and then you got track 4 coming up. It's, you putting something in the middle there that kind of brings it to a more sort of basic level is perfectly fine. I think it's a little long. And I'll be honest, Nubs, if we were at Pine Knob at the Talk show, I might be willing to beat the traffic and exit during the Renee closer. I don't know. Is that fair?
That's fair, especially nowadays at concerts when you're stuck there for 2.5 friggin' hours. So yeah, I think you and I would have been sprinting out of a Pine Knob Music Theater in 1984. Yeah,
we probably would have been good to do that. Well, we certainly wouldn't have sprinted out during this one. This is the title track. It's My Life. Nub, do you share my opinion that this song is impossible to get sick of?
No, I could get sick of it.
Oh, really? I think I could listen to this song twice a day and be perfectly fine.
I like it. I see why it was such a big hit. I love the synth. Paul Webb's bass line is
makes the song. I mean, it
really does.
The keyboard hook during the pre-choruses certainly help, right? I mean, that is one brilliant progression. But the bass really does make it.
Tell me, I like it, so I'm not being smug, and I'm not sure as I'll not being I don't like the hit song guy, but like, tell me what do you love about it so much that makes it impossible to get sick of?
That chromatic addition on the synth during those pre-choruses is just to me it's gorgeous. I mean, that's if you're a Gary Newman guy and all that. I mean, like, I don't know that it gets better than that in terms of having pop sensibility, but also having a progression that's fairly complex. I mean, that's not just like major chords shifting into one another. That's, using some very clever kind of add-ons to some chords that aren't as basic and aren't as traditional. And the vocal, I mean, just like Such a Shame, I mean, you get that sort of interaction of the synth riff or synth progression and then what the vocals are doing on top of it. And it just all works so unbelievably well, And, the chorus is fine. I mean, that's rocking. I mean, that's like you're sort of, to your point, you're 4 on the floor there. But the pre-chorus synth treatment and vocal line is what really kind of, gets me on this one. The middle is great. We play just sort of coming out of the middle. At Montreux, they go into this long jam, a lot of percussion. There's sort of like a bongo solo. I mean, it's extremely cool, the way they do this live, and then they bring it right back into the chorus. So yeah, man, I think, there's a reason why this song has lived on the way it has. And the reason why I think No Doubt found success with it is it's just a damn good song. It's catchy and sort of dancey, but without being annoying. I mean, that was the kind of genius of these guys. I think the instrumentation on this song is extremely deliberate and smart. I mean, whether it's, the acoustic guitar, the percussion elements, the synth, the bass part that we touched on. I mean, this hit number 1 on the Hot Dance Club Party Billboard charts in 1984, number 1. So, I mean, this song certainly caught on. This was a club hit. This was a radio hit. And I think one that, again, these guys were able to sort of do this from time to time where they'd produce something that had a lot of hookiness and catchiness to it, but without it being kind of irritating or annoying, which in 1984, there was plenty of that. I mean, listen, think about what these guys are going up against. I mean, I've got the 1984, Billboard 100 pulled up here, right? Okay. So, the top 10, let's just go through it. When Doves Cry, it's a great song. It's Prince. What's Love Got to Do with It? Say, Say, Say by Paul McCartney and MJ. Footloose was number 4. Okay. I mean, Footloose was the number 4 song of the year. Okay. Against All Odds, I'm not going to say anything bad about that. Jump by Van Halen. Hello, Lionel Richie. Owner of a Lonely Heart, yes. Ghostbusters, Ray Parker Jr., number 9. And Karma Chameleon, number 10. So, I mean, think about the backdrop here and what these guys are going against, and to be able to sort of compete on these dance charts in particular with a song like this that has a lot of, I think, structural and sort of musical integrity to it. Certainly made it cool at the time, but I think makes it even cooler now when you sort of, look back. The video here, again, this was another one they had to do 2 takes of, because he's sort of standing in a zoo with his mouth. They sort of graphically made it so there's an X over his mouth. And again, it's another sort of lip sync protest. He was saying, I'm not gonna lip sync to this. So, you can just sort of blur out my mouth. So it's kind of a funny, interesting, but there's lots of animals in the video, so that's kind of cool. But other than some pretty cool, like zoo safari type animals, it's basically Mark standing there with his mouth blurred out, which, again, another statement against lip syncing, which, I guess was kind of cool, but good enough song to pull that off. All right, we get to sort of toward the back half of the record now, and probably things that get a little bit more sort of deep cuts, because now we've cleared out those 3 singles in the first 4 songs. So track 5 is Tomorrow Started.
Don't look back until you've tried.
Pretty chill, pretty atmospheric here. Again, lots of fretless bass work going on there by Paul Webb, which is a recurring theme. I think it may be his best vocal on the record. So it's kind of a laid back sort of chill song, but also has some intensity to it without being kind of loud or certainly overpowering in any way. What do you think of Tomorrow Started?
I love it. I think it's foreshadowing what's to come, but I love that busy fretless bass line. I got a thing for fretless bass. I just love it. I love the sound of fretless bass guitar. I love the motion behind it, the sliding, not having to hear the fret breaks. I just think a talented, good fretless bass player is something that could make even a crappy band really, really good. And Talk Talk is certainly not a crappy band. So I know it's turned into the Paul Webb Love Fest, which is fine. But all those slides, I just think it gives the song a nice groove and some nice emotion, and just super, super creative. So I love it, man. I think it's setting up the 2 albums that would come next for sure.
And again, all stuff that, could have been programmed, but, hell no, when you've got a bass player like that and you've got the ability to create that sound, through actual instrumentation and instrument playing, and you can tell that those are human hands there, and you can certainly tell when they play live how critical he was to the sound. Next track is probably as poppy as you'll hear these guys, and this is number 6, called The Last Time.
These eyes are dreaming of the last time.
It. I'm not, this is pretty accessible for their standards, even on a record like this. I mean, this sounds like something Vince Clarke could have written, but I think that's in a good way. I mean, it's sort of, you're definitely into the back half of this now. And I think still, as atmospheric as this got at certain times, and certainly they would proceed after this record to be, I think it's nice to have a couple things in there that are pretty simple and accessible. And The Last Time, I think, fits that mark. I like it. You like it?
Very much. I like the lightness of it. It's been a pretty heavy album so far in a lot of ways. And even the melody of the synthesizers being used here is a little lighter. There's a float to this song, whereas the rest of the album tends to feel pretty grounded, sort of heavy, really deep. So I dig that aspect of it. I like the sequence too. I think this song is well sequenced on the album.
Here's a track these guys loved. I don't think I ever saw a set list from these guys without track 7 on it. Call in the Night Boy. Again, a lot going on, a lot of instrumentation. You get certainly some guitar kind of here that isn't as prevalent on some of the other songs, but certainly a key part of some of these licks. Kind of rocking out here a little bit. They clearly really like this song. I'm not sure I love it. The live version's okay. I kind of think that there's a lot. This could have been stripped down a little bit. But what do you think of this more sort of upbeat, a little bit more rockin' talk here on track 7?
I think it's cool. I think it's really cool. They up tempo is not their thing now, especially as the catalog goes on. So we'd have to analyze the next 2 records more deeply. But in my opinion, this is one of the last examples of that, of them actually trying to do something that's, I hesitate to say, a little danceable. And I think it works. This one reminds me of The Party's Over. This almost sounds like an outtake from the first record.
Yeah, I think that this song and the song before it definitely sound a little bit more like you kind of heard on their debut, maybe with some more lushness and a little bit more production than you got on The Party's Over. But yeah, I think the last time and Call in the Night Boy are sort of more of their upbeat numbers and offerings on this one, which really wouldn't apply to the last 2 tracks as we get down the stretch here. Not to be confused with Pet Sounds here. This is Does Caroline Know?
So easy with a thing to blame for breaking every pledge I've made. Does it matter if I can't say? Does it matter if I can't say?
Kind of cool, a little different. You start to kind of feel like you're plowing through a Toto album with all these girls' names, Renee and Caroline,
That's funny. That's a good call. I love those dissonant synth holds. Like, where the hell are those coming from? They kind of make no harmonic sense, but they totally work. And I really dig that. I think they're sweet. And
that's what was cool about this band is if they played, I'm not sure if they played that song live. I'm sure they did at some point. He would be using the pitch bender, playing the note, bending it properly. I mean, these guys did not skimp in terms of relying on any too much pre-record or DAT. They would actually play these things, which always kind of tied everything together. This is the type of song they would have gone out there and said, as crazy as this is with some of these things happening, we're going to actually play this stuff, Let's close it out. Track 9, It's You. A lot of layers here, but everything's kind of working together. I think everything's in sort of proper direction for a very appropriate closer. I would say nothing too melodramatic. And I like how it's not too dreary, kind of like they close the shows with Renee. I mean, I kind of like how this is something that has some feeling, has some bounce, has some emotion to it rather than, I could see them just kind of closing with something that's a little bit like minimalist and dreary, but I kind of like that it's something that kind of brings, ends with some energy, which, sometimes these guys, they could probably be their own worst enemy in avoiding doing something cliche-ish and therefore avoiding something that actually would turn out to be good. But I think in this case, they weren't afraid to lean into something that kind of felt like a closer and felt like something that had, a little bit of a climax to it with a lot of different, synth, percussive, et cetera, all the elements that make It's My Life great. sort of come together here at the end of It's You. You think they close this out in good fashion?
I think perfectly. Love this track. It's probably my second favorite on the album, aside from Such a Shame. I think it's the ideal closer. It's sort of yearning. There's a lot of emotion behind it. Love Hollis's vocal. As limited as he is in range, I do love the fact that his voice is just so expressive.
Oh, yeah.
I think you asked earlier, who can you compare it to? There's no comparison, but Peter Gabriel is probably the closest I could come to of a vocalist with truly very limited range, yet so expressive and so creative in their approach. And I think they also both knew that, we're not Pavarotti here, so we better create music that's more interesting than our voice and allow our voices to be instruments. I think there's a common tie between you and IT as music listeners and appreciators. I think it's that we both appreciate bands where the voice was used as an instrument more than the focal point.
Yep.
And it's beautiful. I love it. I love It's You. I think it's a perfect closer.
That's great. Yeah, definitely. And I think Hollis took that approach too, is that there were some lyrical things that are certainly interesting here, probably more abstract than not, which I also think is cool. It's not like he wasn't ever feeling the need to sort of like be political or sort of like, I have this message I need to, I think that whether it was lyrics or vocal lines, he always sort of approached the vocals as an instrument as much as anything, certainly, to your point, something that we probably appreciate more so than not. All right, that's it. 9 tracks, pretty efficient, pretty to the point, which was always kind of a good thing about these guys as well. And before we get to the final cut, now let's break this one down. Did it matter? Does it hold up? What do you think?
I think it holds up very well. I think all of Talk's material holds up well. You do have to remember the era when you listen to it to appreciate it even more. Early synthesizers, a lot of analog instruments, but the production is just so rich, so amazing. I don't know that they could have done it any better nowadays. And that's when you know that you've got an album that stands the test of time and really a band. I mean, It's My Life is probably the most obvious album that we could do for Talk, but I definitely see this band as a comprehensive deal, right? Like if you're into Talk, you're not into just one song or one album. You really bury yourself into those 4 core first albums. So I think it absolutely holds up amazingly well. If for any other reason, even if it's a little too out there for you, just the clean, crisp production of these records, and certainly this one, I think hold up incredibly well. So what do you think, T? How does it hold up for you?
All right, I got this Billboard thing pulled up, so I'll just give you. We'll do a little pop quiz hot shot here. So I'll give this is 10th on, right? So I'll give the artist, you give the song. Ready? 1984. This is 11. We'll do 11 through 20. We'll see how this goes. All right. John Waite.
Missing You.
Lionel Richie. Good. Lionel Richie.
Oh, geez, that could be a few. Hello
is actually number 7 when I listed it off earlier. So this is another one, number 12.
Oh, okay. Let's say 1984. All Night Long.
All Night Long. Okay. Denise Williams.
Let's Hear for the Boy.
Okay. Bruce Springsteen.
Born in the USA. Dancing in the Dark.
There you go. Cyndi Lauper.
Girls Just Want to Have Fun.
Duran Duran. This could be like 10 of them.
It's got to be off Rio.
It's kind of unfair. I mean, there's.
Yeah. I'm going to say Rio.
It's the Reflex.
Off the other one. Okay.
Cyndi Lauper again.
True Colors. She Bop. I don't know.
Come on, you got this. There's only one left.
Girls Just Want to Have Fun. She Bop. True Colors. I don't know what
her biggest hit.
Girls Just Want to Have Fun was her biggest hit.
Time After Time.
Oh God, her best song.
Yeah, exactly. Pointer Sisters.
There's so many things I want to say right now.
It was their biggest hit. Yeah,
Jump.
Yeah, the Pointer Sisters, man. Those ladies, I'll tell you. We've talked about it a little bit before, but boy, what a bunch of just those ladies they're all worked up, aren't they? Like every song is like they just want to sing about just men, like just strapping big, strong, sweaty men, and all the things they want to do to those men. And They were really, I think they were like a Christian singing, like a gospel group when they came out, right?
Yeah,
And
until
then
they discovered big, strong men.
Then they discovered manliness, and just, boy, they wanted a piece of that. You know, they really did. They really did. Those gals they knew how to party. All right, the Romantics.
What I like about you,
The other one,
talking in your sleep.
there you go. And then last one, this is a tough one. Laura Branigan.
Oh, that's not tough.
I don't know if I would.
It's like an exclamation. Oh shit! Hold on. Fame.
It's not Strut.
Fame.
No, she didn't do Fame. Fame is Irene Cara.
No, Flashdance is Irene Cara.
It's also Fame.
Oh, well, okay.
Come on, man. Dude, 80s, man. I you may have me on everything else. I got you on 80s.
It's one word, right? It's one word.
Well, it was Strut, but it's not Strut.
No, Strut was
Laura
in
Branigan.
Manchester.
No, come on, man. Killing me.
Sweet strut now.
Yeah.
That's Melissa Manchester.
Oh, actually, Strut was Sheena Easton.
Or Sheena Easton.
Yeah. But no, it was actually Self-Control by Laura Branigan. I wouldn't have gotten that either. I'm good at 80s. I wouldn't have gotten that either.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's just do a couple honorable mentions here. Dan Hartman.
I Can Dream About You.
There you go. Oh, another Duran Duran. You want to try another Duran Duran? This was number 43.
Save a Prayer.
Union of the Snake. Love Save a Prayer, though. Chicago.
You're the Inspiration.
Close. Better song.
Hard to say I'm sorry, get away.
Close. As good of a song.
Love Me Tomorrow.
No. What's another just quality Chicago song from that time?
Well, You Still Love Me, but that was in 1987.
Will You Still Love Me is amazing. This is up there with that. So it's also, this is also a David Foster
Get
song.
Away.
Look away.
Look away. Sorry.
It's actually Hard Habit to Break.
That one is.
Oh, here's another Pointer Sisters. Boy, this one also is about just getting down with some big sweaty guys. What do you think this one's?
Well, if it wasn't Jump, it would have been a Neutron Dance.
That was actually Automatic.
Oh, love Automatic.
Great song. Yeah. All right. I mean, sure, we could do this all day. You know?
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, what were we talking about? Oh, It's My Life. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I think it not only holds up well, it's one of those that was ahead of its time. That gets thrown around a lot, whether it's comedy or films, or I mean, there's a lot of, different elements where you can say that certain things were kind of ahead of their time. I think Talk was in a lot of ways. And some of that had to do with the time period they were in, where as we just went through, you could see what was hitting the charts. You could see what was hitting the mainstream. And I think these guys were good enough to do that when they wanted, right? It was kind of like, if we could just wanted to crap out hits, we can do it. But instead they kind of, went for substance, went for musical integrity, artistic integrity. And I think that's one of the things that you have to sort of appreciate about these guys, whether you love their music or not, or whether you love this album or not, they kind of always did it their way. And when you learn more, again, if you go back and kind of watch footage and interviews and those things of Mark, you do realize, albeit sort of a dissatisfied at all times, maybe even a little bit tortured artist syndrome, an artist nonetheless, and I think that that's something that really needs to be appreciated. So you couple that with the fact that this obviously had some very, very special tracks, certainly a couple that I think we could agree are in that category, and then round it out with some album tracks that were really good of their time. And even you're starting to hear them morph towards a little bit of sort of experimentation and a little bit of kind of unique sounds that even on sort of deeper cuts you weren't getting at the time. I think it makes It's My Life not only a pretty good listen and a pretty accessible listen, but also one that I think, to say even that it holds up is a little bit of an understatement. I think it was, well ahead of its time. And it's a great way this will probably be the entry point to this band for a lot of people, and that's perfectly fine. And then if you want to go deeper, you get into some of the later stuff, you can get into The Party's Over, you can get into some of the other work, but certainly I think this is probably the entry for Talk, and appropriately so. And I think if this serves as that for a band like this, then it's, not only, pretty important, but I think it shows that this thing kind of has longevity for a reason. So with that, let's final cut this sucker. Nubs, this will be an interesting one for you. On the turntable in the collection, collecting dust, or are you taking this beautiful, colorful album cover to the for sale bin? Where you got it, bud?
My final cut for It's My Life. I think you have to take away the musician bias. As a musician, I would say it's, in the collection or even higher. I'd say collecting dust because I think that if you're building a collection and it comes down to the band more than the album. I just wouldn't say Talk is an essential band for a collection for the basic collector. So I'm going to say Collecting Dust. Such a Shame is one of the best songs ever made. It's My Life was a huge hit. The album tracks, I think, Renee's a little hard to get through. So it doesn't have that comprehensive top to bottom need to hear it deal going on. So just to try and think of it in a balanced way, I'm going to go with Collecting Dust. For you and I as musicians, the whole Talk catalog should all be owned and operated. So that's where I've got it. T. Where's your final cut?
Interesting. Hey, by the way, you know what number 47 is? It's a Piebro Bryson.
If Ever You're in My Arms Again. Oh, I love this song so much.
Oh, it's so good.
I would love to karaoke this.
Just a second once in a lifetime, maybe too much to ask. Baby, when we were wrong. Come on.
If ever you're in my arms again.
This time I love you much better. God.
If ever you're in my arms
The fact that
again.
that's 47 is a crime. I mean,
Yeah, it is. I agree.
that's way too low.
Way too low.
Piebro sings the shit out of that thing. Piebro.
Sure
Right?
does. Yeah.
Number 59 was Mike Reno and Ann Wilson. You know that one? It's from a movie.
Almost Paradise
Yeah.
off Footloose. Yeah.
You like that song?
Yeah, I like it. It's okay. Anything Ann Wilson sings is kind of dreamy.
Is it as good as Piebro Bryson?
Hell no.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. I agree. For me, It's My Life is it's in the collection, right? And listen, I'm surprised you have it Collecting Dust. You cannot have a record with those two songs on it and have it be anywhere lower than in the collection. You can't, in my opinion. You just can't. So I sort of get your explanation, but at some point you have to say songs that are that quality. I understand not having on the turntable. I don't have it on the turntable either because, you sort of, there's ebbs and flows within the record and there's a couple moments that, you could easily flip and all that. I get it. But, I really think to have this anywhere lower than in the collection is discounting a little bit on how critically good not only those two songs, but a lot of other moments on the record are. So important band. Hopefully this here episode helps a few people discover them or look into them a little bit further. But I've got this one in the collection, which I think is the perfect place for 1984's It's My Life. So, Nubs, what is? Take it, baby. What have you been listening to?
Are you going to interrupt me with the
Probably.
with Dolores?
Probably. Oh, no, not Dolores. Maybe the Billboard Hot 100 I might interrupt you with, though.
Oh, okay. Well, that's fine. That's fine.
You know what's number 100?
What's that?
Well, rounding out the Billboard Hot 100 for 1984 is Yamo Be There.
Yamo Be There. Nice.
Yamo Be There.
3 songs ringing in my head. Not Yamo.
Hey, you going
Be
to
There.
the game tonight? Yeah, Mo Be There. I feel like we got to work that into the. Hey, you hitting the pub tonight? Yeah, Mo Be There. Why don't we say that
It's
ever?
a miss. I don't know. We should. We should.
Anyway, what do you got, buddy?
3 quick ones. Stay Together by the Jolly Jam. Great band. That's Ty Tabor's side project with Rod Morgan, Sting of Winger, and a couple other dudes. Shame, the Jam by Stabbing Westward. One of the more underrated bands.
Great
Of
song.
the
By
90s.
the way, did you hear the new Winger songs? There are 2 new Winger songs.
No, I haven't.
Check those out.
I will.
New
I indeed
record
will.
coming out in June, I believe.
And lastly, a little song by Blue Oyster Cult called Burnin' For You. T, what is in your head?
Another great live version off of Live. What is it? Live Cult? Live Oyster? I've been learning a lot about JJ Cale, and as a Widespread Panic fan, it sort of took me a while, but didn't fully realize that JJ Cale wrote Call Me the Breeze, the Lynyrd Skynyrd song After Midnight, and Cocaine. I mean, Eric Clapton, great guitar player, but essentially just sort of was a cover artist. I don't know. Was he really a great songwriter? I mean, After Midnight and Cocaine are two of his hugest hits, both written by JJ Cale. So, and Traveling Light, which obviously became a very well-known Panic tune. So, I mean, this guy was way more influential than I realized, very under the radar. So I've been digging into a lot of JJ Cale tunes, but I'm going to throw Cajun Moon out there because, that's kind of a jam. So we'll go with that. There's a song by a group. Have you ever heard of Eddie 9 Volt?
Yes.
Kind of like bluesy country rock kind of thing. It's like very throwback. Dude, he's got a song called Yella Alligator. Check it out. It's really good. Total jam. Total jam. So check that out. And then I've also been digging into, I know somebody that, speaking of powerhouse vocalists, I've been listening to some Rainbow. And so I'll just throw out, I mean, there's a lot there, but there's a song from Ronnie James Dio and crew, called Catch the Rainbow.
Oh, I like Catch the Rainbow.
Yeah, pretty good.
My favorite is Man on the Silver Mountain, though.
Oh, yeah. Great one. Yeah, they're a good band. So that's what's in my head. Nub, thanks, buddy. We were just talking before the episode. We haven't hung or talked in a while. So, this episode 84 kind of brought us together. I'm very appreciative. I'm almost don't want to end the episode because I'm just not sure when we're going to talk again.
I think it'll be very soon. But yeah, great choice. Love it. And hey, it's my life, T.
Yep. And don't you forget. And what do you got on tap for us next, partner?
Well, I can assure you it's going to be something very, very exciting.
Translation, you don't have anything planned, do you?
We'll talk about it. That's the next thing we'll talk about.
All right.
Good choice, man.
All right. Yeah, and thank you, buddy. And hey, that's a wrap on episode 84. Thank you, as always, for joining us on this talk journey. And hey, maybe this'll convince you to go check out and learn about a new group from the past. R.I.P. the great Mark Hollis. Hey, appreciate you. Y'all be good. Y'all take care. Avoid the clap, avoid the vid, and get after it. Enjoy this sunshine that's upon us. And we will see you next time for episode 85. We'll see what Nubs has up his sleeveless here on Two Twins and an album. Y'all take care now.
Two twins and an album.
Well, that's about it. That's all we have. I hope it wasn't too disappointing. We will see you on tour. Until then, take it easy.